However, as is often the case, the original got more critical acclaim because it focused more on story. One of the reviews, I've took three independent sources to review both films, and film four of the original said that a quote from them was Cook's second feature with Dudley Moore still stands as the finest realization of the pair's partnership, if not their Sergeant Pepper. If not their Sergeant Pepper. Filmcritic.com said Bedazzled is a goofy, good-natured comedy based on the Force legend and is probably Cook and Moore's most finest product. And BBC Films said that humour is frequently so surreal it takes you completely by surprise, but it also bears a sharply satirical criticism of modern life. Whereas the remake's critical response was nowhere near as positive. Film four said, sadly, something somewhere along the line has horribly wrong. Filmcritic.com said the movie is so limp it is all but forgotten on the ride home. BBC Films said this take on the forced metaphorish, the forced, whatever this other bloke's name, legend turns from a sharp satire for intellectual adults into an obvious gag fest aimed at a younger mainstream audience. However, the original, the mood of the audience on the whole was very positive towards the original. It had a very good audience review, and that was for similar reasons of story and content. A lot of the audience responses that I've read mostly did praise it on the content. One response being possibly Cook's greatest and yes, most underrated piece of work. Another response being quite possibly one of the funniest films ever made. Another response being Peter Cook and Dudley Moore come up with a truly brilliant idea in what has become a true comedy classic and has been remade into a rash Hollywood blockbuster. Whereas the remake's audience response was very critical. However, there were some people who did enjoy the remake and thought it was actually superior to the original. One response being this is a real classic and superior to the original. Most responses, though, most good responses did say they found the film surprisingly good. I kept the tape of this film for months because I wanted to see the original first. Now I've seen both. I have to say the new version is a lot better than I expected. I expected it. I think that indicates that the audience, there is a tendency for Americans to remake British films and very much change them and differ from the content, as of course they want to chase their specific target audience and focus more on more on classic proven set pieces and special effects and high production values and content. And of the negative audience responses, again, of course they did refer to content. Some two negative responses that I read were, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Watch the original and don't even bother with this. In other words, this is an appalling waste of money, time, and electricity, and it appears to be the work of Mr. Spigot himself, Mr. Spigot being the devil. When the original Bedazzled was released on DVD finally on the 25th of July 2005, it was open to a whole new modern audience, and a large portion of the comments from that audience who had bought the DVD said that the issues discussed are still relevant today. However, a lot of responses to the remake did say that it was a very forgettable film, and this can be seen by the fact that the remake's weekend gross got lower and lower as the weeks went on. The weekend gross decreased by 31.4% just 1 week after its release, even even though it was in 11 more theatres that week. So, it was distribution increased, um, but less people went to see it, which just shows you how forgettable it is, and how the remake, which still got very positive reviews from a whole different kind of audience. Um, it was it was 48, 38 years after the original was made, still got a very big, very good response. So it shows you how the original um, lasted the test of time, whereas the remake did. So in conclusion, the original Bedazzled, which had a much lower budget of only $770,000, um, focused more on story and script because didn't have that as high budget to have the high production values, and it didn't have that same pressure, of course, to turn a profit because it was financed by Stanley Donen, and he was a great friend of Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and so they got complete creative control, and I think it was much more a labour of love really, and it did turn a profit of 1.5 million. Um, but it's not it's clearly no way as commercially successful as the remake. Um, the remake, of course, being funded, um, by 21st Century Fox, um, and Regency Enterprises, co-production between the two, and it had a budget of 48 million, and of course it turned in a profit of over 90 million, a highly successful, much more highly successful film than the original. And this is because they stuck to the proven Hollywood set pieces that were proven to be successful with that target audience they were aiming at. Set pieces being the happy ending, as I mentioned before, the romantic, you know, just better high production values, special effects. Um, but the thing is, the original was more successful critically, and was more successful with audience, and has lasted the test of time, whereas the remake didn't, because the remake did ignore um, a lot of it didn't focus on content, on story, on script, um, as much as the remake did, as much as the original did. And this is often the case between British and American films, which I think this is why this instance of a Americans try to remake a British film is very much represents the difference between the British and the American film industries, because British were trapped in a vicious cycle of Britain. We can't, our film industry, of course, we can't afford these high production values to turn a big profit in our films. So we do focus more on story and script. We're forced to, and you see that in this film. And they end up, I feel, and is critically most critics feel, being more films with more substance, um, more depth to them, but they're not as commercially successful as the American films, which is a big problem.